de jure reason why you're here today is to consider some IPDs. The de facto reason is to determine whether or not Assembly Square will be developed for big boxes or as high-density mixed-use transit-related urban development.
I look at Plan 1 is basically nothing but a parking lot. And also bringing big boxes in here will disturb its continuous traffic.
Massive parking lots are aesthetically displeasing, destroy any sense of place, and cause serious environmental problems.
Each one of these big boxes, with the possible exception of Kmart, can be expected to generate 10,000 or so vehicle trips per day.
I can't imagine one person in here that would want to see this much more traffic.
Somerville faces a serious continuing shortfall in tax revenue, and the developers have signed agreements that will bring much needed funds into the city coffers. But although the amounts sound enormous to an individual and will bring immediate financial benefits, they will fall far short of meeting the city's long-term future financial needs.
This is peanuts. It's pathetic. It's shameful.
Big box doesn't give this city any revenue back to us. None whatsoever.
Just big box, everybody gets paid $5, $6 an hour. That's not what Somerville needs.
I have a 95-year-old mother in New Hampshire, and the last straw that was the reason that she had to move to assisted living was that she could no longer negotiate the big box stores.
People are looking to put up high-tech and research facilities that would generate a tremendous amount of income for the city and revenue, a lot more than Home Depot and IQ, but with a lot less traffic.
$30 million. The Mystic View Task Force zoning proposal allows for this size contribution not just in 1 year, but every year for the rest of our lives. It's not a one-time gift, it's a fundamental change to the commercial revenue stream of this city.
One of the inevitable questions is, how do you get there? How can this be done? And the answer is, it's done by passing this kind of legislation. We know that developers are out there who are interested in doing this. What they need to know is that the city is serious about encouraging it, and passing this kind of legislation would do just that.
We have even international investors wanting to invest in Somerville, and we know that there are big investors who would like to do what the mayor calls big bucks, not big boxes.
Developers are ready today to come in and build office towers in this very location.
I think the question is, where does Somerville want to be when that happens? Does it want to be a great place to live, work, and play, where people want to go to? Or does it just want to be the nearest strip mall to the big city?
Big box stores are Slummerville. Mixed use is Somerville.
Good evening. Welcome to Dead Air Live. My name is Ted Lagos, and this evening's program focuses on the Mystic View Task Force and its efforts to provide leadership towards community involvement in the Mystic View Assembly Square Development Project. The task force had expectations of complementing the efforts of Somerville's political leaders in designing and bringing to fruition a deliberate and comprehensive plan of action. They expressed their interest as a vision for an inclusive revitalization of Somerville. It centered on the development of this region's last undeveloped frontier. Their offer incorporated fascinating design objectives for Somerville's waterfront on the Mystic River, the Old Fort Assembly Plant Mall, extensive housing opportunities, as well as beautiful parks and leisure activities for residents of this city. The task force goals encompass principles formulated by Frederick Law Olmsted and others to revitalize our only waterfront and develop a mixed-use destination for its residents. The task force organized open community forums that surveyed the interests of people in Somerville and its surrounding region. There is a breakdown now between city officials and citizens wishing to have some influence in the decision-making process. Informed critics argue that the development has turned from becoming a broad community resource to yet another elite financial industrial complex boondoggle. As our contribution to the public discussion, the Somerville Producers Group offers 4 people representing the public's interest. They include the Mystic View Task Force's leadership and some professional advisors to give their opinions and judgment on the city's design proposals and the agreements they have formulated. 3 proposals exist outlining how the site should be developed. Halfway through this program, we'll take a break to play a tape-recorded message from Alderman Denise Provo, who's contributed one of those proposals. Unfortunately, she is at a hearing in chambers this evening. Hers is considered a conscientious alternative to the city's plan and is similar in viability to what this public task force envisions. On with the show.
Good evening, Ted. My name is Lawrence Paolella. I'm a resident and member of the Mystic View Task Force. Nice to be here.
I'm happy to be here, Ted. My name is John Rossi. I'm also a member of the Mystic View Task Force.
And my name is Dale Patterson. I'm Lawrence's friend and neighbor on Oxford Street. And I guess at this point, probably I'm not a member of the Mystic View Task Force. You guys took me off the computer mailing list a while back.
I'm Walter Mattos. I'm a resident of East Somerville, also a member of the Mystic View Task Force.
What would be helpful here is to take you through a visual of the Mystic View site. And so everybody has an orientation of just what exactly this 140-acre parcel looks like. We have an aerial image that if you can bring up on the screen, I'd be happy to walk you through. This is an aerial shot of the Mystic View site and the boundary that has just flown in around there. We neighbor with the Mystic River and City of Boston right to our south. The whole acreage encompasses 145 acres. Again, we neighbor with the City of Boston, but we are just under 3 miles to the heart of Boston's financial district. Some other built-in amenities to this site, I-93, so there's a major interstate corridor just abutting the site to the south. And one of the finest amenities that would be difficult to buy today is an orange line and 3 commuter rails that are currently at grade, at ground level, leading right into this site from Medford right into Sullivan Square. There's Route 28, a bridge over Mystic River. And Foss Park, again, one of the very few green spaces that the residents of the City of Somerville have to enjoy. And East Somerville neighborhood, just to the other side of 93. 10 Hills neighborhood. And again, these neighborhoods really define what an orphan site the 140-acre Assembly Square parcel is. There should be more icons that are coming up. You'll see the fact that I'd mentioned that this is an orphan site. It's really so important that the residents really come and rally together behind probably what is the biggest parcel of the city that doesn't have a voice. So we really need to be its voice.
Yes, when I got involved, I guess it's a little over 2 years ago, the image that came to mind for me was here we are in a very vital, exciting city, a wonderful time here in Somerville. And I had this feeling like I was 16, 17 years old, raring to go in high school, and trying to make a decision as to how I wanted to have an effect and plan my life. And of course, there were economic pulls coming from a middle-class background in New York City to get a job, any job. And I had an Uncle Louis who owned a trucking company, and he offered me that job with some training, and I could learn to be a handyman, and I'm sure there was some potential there. But pulling me in the other direction was my immediate family, my mother and father, particularly my mother, who said, you know, it probably would serve you well if you chose to invest in yourself, in an education. And I would say, but Ma, how could we afford this? Right. She said, we'll make it happen. You'll get a job, your brother will get a job, your father, well, we're not too sure about him, but I'm sure he'll continue to help out.
You have to sacrifice.
Yes, yes. And it wasn't really all that clear right then and there. But once I made the decision and came up with the plan and got myself accepted into a school, It was engineering in my case.
And you didn't take the turkey in the bush.
That's true. We didn't have many turkeys in Brooklyn. That's true. But certainly, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. The competition was tough. There were a lot of people in the same situation. And once again, the analogy to Somerville. Here we are, vital, ready to go, ready to make a decision.
Yes.
We've got the raw material. Now, what are our choices? And certainly, for me, that little story, it keys right into where we are in Somerville today.
Well, when you said that, and I said turkey in the bush, it reminded me of what's happening at the mall. You know, it really is, it's back to being almost an abandoned Ford plant, because it hasn't been a mall for quite a while. And you have one large store, a successful operation like Kmart, and at the other end you have a retail operation that sells whatever it can find at discount. And in the middle you're putting in a lumber yard. You know, and what strikes me about that particular lumber yard is last year they had $98 million in sales. And on a good week, it might have been as much as $3 million in that week. And on a bad week, it would have been $1 million in sales.
The existing Home Depot.
Absolutely. And that's tonnage being carried out the door of lumber, siding, roofing, aluminum, all the other things. Well, they sell hammers and screwdrivers that fit in smaller bags, but a great amount of that $1 million in sales was really heavy-duty equipment coming right out a mall door onto a street with the trucks.
Some of it getting used right here in Somerville by Somerville residents, people who need to be able to go someplace.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we can't anymore talk about, unfortunately, neighborhood hardware stores seem to be gone. Somerville lumber is not going to come back. We need to go someplace to buy our hammers and our screws and our lumber and our light bulbs and all of those things. And if you go into Home Depot any night of the week, you'll find lots of people from Somerville and surrounding communities in there getting the goods that they need. And if the Home Depot is not there, you have to wonder, well, where we'll go. Now, maybe it's just over to Everett, and maybe that's only another 10 or 15 minutes. But nevertheless, you know, I think that if you were to think that the Everett store weren't going to be there, then the Home Depot would be incredibly valuable to people living in this community.
And it is now
and
a block
and what
away,
I haven't heard from, you know, what are we going to have that's going to be better than that?
Well, I think we need to bring up a slide to kind of bring the folks up to date as to what proposals are on the table. Right now, we see here on the lower end a proposal which clearly indicates that it will be a second Home Depot. The site already has a very viable and busy Home Depot as we are experiencing today, but this proposal includes a larger Home Depot and a ultimate transfer of the existing Home Depot that's there now into a new type of retail center called an Expo by Home Depot.
Is that kitchen and bath, or what is it?
I'm not really sure, but it's on some level they call it a little bit higher end, an expanded market product. And I'd like to say that Mystic View Task Force is not opposed to these particular brands or the kinds of services that they offer or the products they offer, and that would include IKEA, Home Depot, or Kmart. We might have another feeling about Building 19, but
I know a lot of people who like Building 19.
That's true. My wife will occasionally.
There are trucks being loaded at Building 19 as we speak with goods to go down to El Salvador, no doubt.
Wow.
Because that's where people can shop and buy stuff. They buy a truck, buy goods there, you know, salvage, drive it across the country, manage to get it through Mexico.
Fantastic.
It serves people who are living in East Somerville.
It's not about any of these retail establishments as being unhealthy or undesirable. It's about the configuration of the buildings that they occupy as to whether that type of one-story or two-story building surrounded by surface parking serves the needs of the people of Somerville in terms of a tax revenue a base or on a job base. Yes, there are jobs there, but on a square foot basis, there isn't 1/20th the number of jobs that an office building could provide in the same footprint. That's what it's all about. Somerville is already the most densely populated city
Lawrence, let me just say that's one frame of reference.
That's true.
But there are other frames of reference, and maybe I present that part of what should be there should be something that's really useful to people who live here in the city. There are lots of things over there now, and I don't like, the way big boxes look on the outside, but I'm an optimist about people like the people in Mystic View Task Force being able to encourage big box retailers to do things to make their big boxes much more attractive, and maybe even do things like add structured parking.
I would like to contribute this idea that where they are now, a block away, having Home Depot there is very handy, and they've got their own parking lot, and there isn't any interference with other activity. And when you take the second and third stages of the development as Mystic View, you see housing maybe for 10,000 people. And now suddenly it isn't an industrial site the way it is now. It fits, it's in context where it's located right now. You've got, a stereo center next door, an electronics store, a lot of open space. You have a movie theater with a big parking lot. You have a nightclub out back, and there isn't anything in this area. But when you build it up and put in some really nice promenades, and you put in some stores and some nice little coffee shops and clothing stores, and if it's built up properly and you have 10,000 apartments there, or I haven't heard a number yet.
Well, I don't think
it doesn't.
We're
it's
not
not in
talking 10,000
context.
apartments. We're talking about in the Mystic View
Well,
vision. We're
people,
talking about 1,000,
Okay.
1,000 apartments with a range of affordability.
Right. When
and
you
that's,
talk about
that's
it as
necessary.
a destination, how many people would be coming in?
Oh well,
and
on
when
a
you
full,
put it in
on a
that
full-
context, how does the lumberyard, quote unquote,
Well,
Home Depot?
that's the whole job issue.
Is it in context at that point?
Well, the area itself, when I was a young lad, the Ford Motor Company was down there, and there was a lot of good jobs there. In fact, when I was a senior in high school, I toured the Ford plant, and these were good jobs. These were jobs that people came by train, by bus, walked from East Somerville and all, and went to work, and plus other industrial complex like the First National Warehouse. What we need, basically, in Somerville is some revenue, and we also need jobs that are competitive. In a sense, if you have to buy a $250,000 home or $300,000 home, you have to make at least $40,000 to $50,000 a year to maintain a residence in Somerville if you're buying in. And what I look here, we're losing a golden opportunity in the sense of bringing in some industry, in the sense of R&D work, or even this cable type of work, which brings in good jobs. And I think that's what we need. We need something to help our tax base. We need something to help the people to get jobs. Most people in Somerville that have good high-tech jobs have to leave the city to go to their work. I think it's...
Walter, pardon me for interrupting.
Sure.
Why is that a problem, that for some of those kinds of jobs, people go outside of Somerville, which has for many years been primarily a residential community? I mean, it takes 20 minutes to get to downtown Boston. It takes, 30 minutes to get out to Route 128 and to a workplace out there. I just don't quite get the art.
You know, that we would like to become a more transit-orientated community for environmental reasons, energy consumption reasons, just wear and tear on our roadways and infrastructure.
We don't like the car, and that's why we've gone with the big dig.
Well, I feel that if the job opportunities here in Somerville, also the opportunity for individuals to come to Somerville to buy a home and stay here and call it their home and their city and the place where they work. Yes, they can jump on and go into Boston and whatnot. We talk about transportation coming in. They're talking about transportation, and they're also talking about big box. So you're going to see very few people carrying couches on the MBTA or carrying that lumber on the MTA. So you're going to, my other big part of my French bitch is the traffic. Traffic is horrendous in East Somerville. Cambridge traffic, they're trying to abandon their truck route and saying that we want no trucking after 7 o'clock. They're going to reroute and they're going to have exclusion. And then when you take a look at Cambridge and the surrounding roads like 16 and 60 and all that, you have to come through Somerville. You have to come up McGrath Highway. We might even lose streets like Broadway, Highland Avenue, and whatnot. I feel this is a golden opportunity to bring jobs on here, use that MBTA where you can get off and go to work. And if you're driving a car, it'd be structured parking. It wouldn't be the huge parking lot that you see out there now that gives us nothing in the city. It gives us the least amount of money to the city. I think we have to develop that, and we have to bring in jobs for one, and I think people that could, even if they are coming out of, say from Boston or come on the MBT and go to work and go back home. This is important.
But a mixed-use situation.
Mixed use
to
is
the
excellent.
numbers that we're talking about, or also this concept that the tourist folks are talking about on Sturtevant Street, the kind of density which is more in line with what we're talking about, would produce 30,000 jobs. And it's clear that a project of this magnitude doesn't happen in 5 years, 10 years, but it's a build out over a period of time. Like it took Kendall Square 25 years to approach its 80 to 85% build out, and still going strong. And I think we have a slide here that shows the growth in terms of tax revenues for Kendall Square. If it's there, we go. Both these projects started in about the early 80s, and as you could see there, the red on the left, that at the very beginning, in the early 80s, the mall was producing a little bit more taxes than the early build-out at Kendall Square. But as you can see, between 85 and 90, there was a huge jump, and a continued growth right up to the current. And this is what our concerns are. It's not about criticizing the big box per se. It's what can the big box give back as compared to a more urban scale. After all, we're not a suburb here in Somerville.
And we are an inner suburb of Boston. But that doesn't mean that we need to build up like a suburb that has a lot of land available. But Kendall Square is an interesting comparison. I don't think anybody at this table would actually want Mystic View to end up the way Kendall Square has. I mean, would you want to go there? Do you go there?
I don't go there.
I don't go there. If you were to compare what's happening in Kendall Square at night now with what's happening at Assembly Square at night, there's a world of difference. I mean, you may not like all the cars. I don't like all the cars either at Assembly Square, but there's life there. There are people going to the movies. And yeah, there are over in Kendall Square, but it's not the same. There are people at Good Time Emporium. There are people working out at the gym. There are people shopping.
All of those
Kendall
situations
Square
will remain in a different configuration.
Well, I'd love to hear about that, because one of my concerns has been that there's just, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want this. What are you going to give me that's the same or better?
No one lives in that site right now. Our proposal includes, for the very reason that you're mentioning it, to give it a street life vitality, to give it a sense of neighborhood, where there are people who take pride in what's going on their block, and there'll be many blocks if the IPD that is being suggested now, to bring smaller block size, where people are encouraged to walk, where you feel safe because there are other people on the street. This is what gives us all. This is what we like so much about Davis Square, Union Square. It has that kind of humanistic attachment. Although urban, you do get a sense that you're in contact with your neighbors, the retail merchants, the professional people who serve those areas, the policemen who are on the beat, the fire station is visible. This is the kind of thing we're looking for, and I agree with you.
There are also other parts of the city that are helping to increase revenues in the city, and I just want to say that we don't have to depend entirely on Assembly Square to make more money with what we've got. If you read a recent Meredith and Grew report, they're citing the high-tech buildups in other parts of the city. So there's potential here. We don't have to put all our eggs over at Assembly Square. I mean, we can still. I'm concerned that if we build up with a lot of R&D and high-end office space, that people are going to be working there who don't currently live in Somerville. They're going to be making big bucks. They're going to look around and say, I could be living here more comfortably. And where are they going to look? They're going to look to East Somerville. And I mean, East Somerville is already a neighborhood that's, it may be too late already for East Somerville.
Dale, it's a matter of choice. If people in Somerville work there, or they don't work there, or they come from in and all that, it's basically that industry will bring in more revenue to the city of Somerville, even if not a sole Somerville worker in that building, better than a parking lot or a big store that has retail help, low-paying jobs, and
I'm tired of people disparaging retail jobs all the time. You know, maybe I'm the only person at this table who's ever worked in retail. But I have.
I worked at A&S department store in Brooklyn
okay,
for
so
2 years.
you know, sometimes the retail is the right job at the right time, and it's
and there will
there
be
have been times when it's been
there'll
the
be
job
street
that I've
edge
needed.
retail on the first and second floors of this entire project. This is not only about high-end office jobs. There's biotech jobs.
But it's going to be retail for people working in high-end office jobs. It's going to be the gap.
I
It's
think
not
the
gonna
value
be-
of what Dale's saying is that it's a balanced view he's proposing. And it's an important point, so we don't put ourselves too far out, that we do agree with what he's saying, but in a sense, are we talking about a small
Truly a mixed
focus
use,
about...
that's what we're talking
about a narrow view in this discussion, or the larger view of the city. And what I'd like to offer for the larger view as a topic for discussion is the demographic changes that are happening in the city. And not just the new Americans, because we have a really healthy community of Portuguese and Latinos, Haitians, and a number of other cultures that are coming in. And there's a tremendous dynamic. They're coming into East Somerville because it's the low-rent area of the city. And there are going to be some changes in that area when this builds up, as a matter of fact. And we're looking at a generation from now. But the interesting thing, in a very short period of time, and not 1 or 2 generations, but in a year, 2, 3, we've seen tremendous changes of the student population in Somerville. We've seen the houses that were selling for $75,000 selling for $350,000 to $500,000 in a very short period of time. And I've talked to people that feel very happy. They bought something for $100,000 and its value is $400,000.
There's a strong push for gentrification. I think it's important that we move on to talk about what a mixed-use community might look like in a pictorial to give a sense of the kind of density. Now, this is a computer-generated vision here, but to give you a sense of various building heights, you'll see some flags coming up here which will kind of pinpoint where some of these amenities will occur.
Sure. You know, I like some of the points that Dale has raised. Even Kendall Square, for example, how it doesn't work at night. I mean, we have the good fortune of going around and looking at locations just within 3 and 5 miles and taking the bits and pieces that we like, that think work. Even with regard to the what are often tagged as low-paying retail kind of jobs, is one of the underpinning rules that you want to stay with when doing a plan is what benefits the greatest number of people. So that there could be retail-paying jobs, but yet our city is not exporting its highest intellectual capital to have to get in a car and get on a train and go and work 3 or 5 or 15 miles away. I know there are current landowners of this site, but we still are idealistic and visionary to think we have a clean canvas to try to shape this. The slide, if we can go back to it, is a result of the community dialogue that took place on May 22nd of '99. And here again, the overlay to the similar image that you had seen, but utilizing the T-stop, actually creating one for the rail line that is right there, which is the orange line and the commuter rail. If I can have the next. Expanded green space. Again, we pointed out Foss Park, and it's one of the biggest, yet doesn't total up to much considering Somerville's population. But this is really a piece that should come to fruition for this site, regardless of what is the development. This should not be something that concessions should be made on, because it's not something you'll regain anytime easily.
Is the color coding represent different elements? Is part of it housing and part of it the blue is business? Or
no, not really. Not really.
But I think you'll find that there's be next to no disagreement about wanting green space along the riverfront. I think everybody wants that.
Yes, but of course, that can only come when there's a denser, taller building involvement, so we can pull back, and certainly, and yes, and eliminate the surface parking. Where else is the land going to come from? We've allocated in our plan and in our IPD a minimum of 30% on certain size developments to be dedicated to open space. And that's not overly generous, but certainly in proportion to what Somerville's needs are long-term.
I also thought when I first came to this group and listened to information, of course my mind was concerned about jobs, but on the green space, about the 200-foot footage from the river and all that. Now the city is talking about reducing that footage, so they're actually reducing the green space that you're talking about, Dale. The reason why I think green space will be a reality is because of a mixed-use type and a real good plan and development in that area. That supports the area of green space. Parking lots supports the big box. It doesn't do anything for us, and that parking lot will take away from the green space, it will take away from the tax revenue, it will take away from jobs. We have to have a good plan. We cannot start with something that might fail. And it might fail in a very short period of time. If economics go as they go, and we've seen it there once, it will repeat itself. And you still
Retail is the big box is
retail,
vulnerable.
Even today,
as a business
J.C. Penney's closing stores. You know, I mean,
Kmart has closed 72 stores in the last year.
They didn't close. Imagine that they didn't close Somerville, did they? Huh?
Well, let me play the devil's advocate.
Sure.
That's all I'm doing here on the green space for a minute, because I do a hot set show, and I've had people call up and say, yeah, some green space would be nice along the river, but there's the park there, the Draw 7 Park. Now, a lot of people don't even know it's there, and it gets used maybe for some soccer, and people walk their dogs there. There's a park along the 10 Hills piece of the river that's not very well maintained, but it's parkland that doesn't seem to be very much used sometimes, although the boathouse is there and the kids get a lot of use out of that. And then you go across the river, across from 10 Hills, into the Medford Park, which I believe is a MDC park, very nicely maintained, a beautiful park that seems to be somewhat underused to me. And so it seems like I'm not sure that the demand there is for the green space as much as it is for if you had to choose between a park and a place to go shop, I wonder where we'd come down on that.
Well,
if we put it to the vote, Lawrence.
Let me add that what I get is that the city hasn't had an underlying philosophy that touches on those things. And as an example, the green space in other areas, and going back to the forces that are at work in this group, in the community, and trying to be creative about it, we don't hear people talking about cookouts like you see up in Starrow Drive on the Charles River. We don't see a bandstand or shells where there might be a large open area where the community come and have concerts. We don't have a place for the summer during the summer where families could go for picnics. We don't have a place on New Year's Eve that Somerville could have its own first night and set up fireworks there at a large open area with a few thousand people, Somervillians coming in and having an old-fashioned good time, you know? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Somerville Common.
A place where we can gather.
And so the underlying philosophy, and I'm not a member of Mystic View Task Force, I'm a member of the Somerville Producers Group, but these issues are very close to me. I've worked in music and I'm interested in the arts, and I don't see any philosophical underpinnings or support in the city for those kind of activities. And many of the changes that have taken place, I see, tend to diminish the forces that were at work in the city to try to develop it in that direction, you know.
I guess I disagree that there's no support. I think that the city has historically shown significant support to arts and artists in the city.
I think it had under the previous administration, but you're finding changes now.
Oh, that's true.
You know, not to criticize anybody specifically, but it's not as good as it used to be when I first moved in.
Part of the shortfall in the struggle is the limitations on the cash flow coming into the city.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think in 1998, a little over 42% of our operating budget, not capital budget, operating budget was provided by the state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, a good chunk of that was for specifically for education,
mm-hmm.
but really, we do not meet our needs, and to depend upon the state going forward with tax cuts, as we just experienced, I think it's reasonable to assume that we're going to have to tighten our belts even further. And Somerville knows how to do it. We've done it before, but the question is this tightening results in deferred maintenance, which eventually is going to catch up, like with the sewer system and the bridges that need to be repaired and repaved. And
I guess I'm more optimistic about the capacity of other neighborhoods in the city, Davis Square and the Innerbelt area, the Boynton Yards area, to pick up and be generating more revenue. I mean, there are lots of opportunities
They
here.
certainly, this is not about putting all of our focus and energy onto this site. The Mystic View Task Force, as a citizens group, chose that particular site as a model site because of its enormous size, and something we haven't mentioned here this evening, its enormous existing transit infrastructure. It would cost $5 billion to replace that anywhere else in Somerville. And those other squares that you talk about, can you imagine what it would cost to bring T or spurs from, or ramps from I-93, and the havoc it would raise to cross neighborhoods and stuff? One of the things about this site that lends itself to the scale of development that we're talking about is the fact that you can get to it from these major existing infrastructures with properly planned off-ramps and T-stops without overrunning the rest of Somerville.
Okay, so it's not all jobs for Somerville residents. We'll still have people coming down 93 for them.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. With more revenue. Well, if they come down 93 now.
It's, you know, maybe, you know, I'd like Somerville people to have good jobs. But the thing is good jobs. That's what I'm stating here, is good jobs. To me, when you have good jobs and when you have a good tax base and you get good revenue coming in and you put it back in the school system and you tell the students these are the opportunities you have. If you say your opportunity is, yes, there'll be a job for you in retail, you know, and you say, well, that isn't good enough. We want an opportunity. Yes, if you have to have that retail job, then go and get that retail job. But I'm trying to say Somerville kids today need a better future, and if they can get their future right out of their city, in their city, what else can you ask for?
You know, Walter, I just want to disagree that all retail jobs are bad jobs. If you look at the IKEA website, you know, a corporation that has stores in 26 countries around the world and has you know, a terrific management training program, and that is really, you know, taking people and developing and letting them rise through the ranks, you know, to really get to good jobs, then it's not all retail is. I agree with you. You know, if you're a part-time cashier in a big box store, it's not a good job, and you probably want something else. On the other hand, sometimes that's the job you can handle at that particular time because of other constraints in your life, like the hours you can work or the transportation that's available to you or whatever.
Well, again, you know, there's always going to be retail jobs. And
I still want to shop, you know.
You want to shop. Like you said, you don't mind going to Everett.
Yeah, so
I'm trying to say that we have some land here that's so valuable. If we put in that type of makeup and those type of jobs, we've missed the boat. Other people will benefit by it. People like Charlestown. Charlestown is developed to a point where you won't have a big box there. You will have some retail, and it'll be on Rutherford Ave, and you'll have it in Main Street and all that. You'll have that, but you won't have the big. You won't even have supermarkets in there. They'll be coming in out of that town.
University Park, which just opened up there on Mass Ave in Cambridge, I think reflects a nice balance of street edge retail, of a second floor parking garage next to a Star Market. I mean, that's something that's innovative, to see a supermarket on the second floor where you can drive in to a garage and get your groceries in a very comfortable way.
And there's an example of something that's traditionally a big box.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
So,
Innovation.
So there are possibilities.
Absolutely.
Let me add, if I can add that an interesting point, Dale, of that you're making, this interesting aspect of it, is that we have in East Somerville 1,000 people that are looking for those kinds of jobs. You know, East Somerville is the lower income level of the city. There are a number of people unemployed in the area, and those are good jobs. And nowadays they're paying $7, $10, $12 an hour. So we've got a workforce for that, but there certainly isn't enough for the 1,000 people that may be available. and those people are going to be trucking somewhere else. If it's high-tech or the low-paying jobs, if all of them in Somerville are taking, if everybody, we have super high unemployment, we're going to find people coming from other parts of the city. They're going to be traveling 15, 20, 30 miles to work the $5, $7, $10 jobs at McDonald's and at the lumberyard and at
I think we need to move to the table.
Yes, and we're going to visit now with Denise Provo, and she has a clip giving us her opinion. She happens to be busy this evening working at City Hall, so please let's run the clip. Thank you.
We all want to see good development in the city. We want to see the city become more prosperous. We are impinged on by traffic at the moment, and we'd like to get that under control. I think the common ground is still there. I think there's plenty of opportunity for mediation of these disputes. I think we should recognize even that the community and the developers have some common ground too, and you know that the criticism that's been leveled has been against an individual who's taken an appeal. It's easy to take a hit at a woman on her own, a grandmother who lives across the street from the site and is concerned about the consequences. I think what we're seeing here is a substantial amount of scapegoating. The city traditionally has had a lot of fiscal challenges and is facing more. The governor put on the ballot last fall questions for a referendum to roll back the state income tax. Every public official in the city opposed those questions because they cause a revenue shortfall in Somerville. We're now looking at that revenue shortfall, and there's some effort to put that responsibility at Mystic View's door. What's ironic here is that Mystic View has shown some very realistic long-term scenarios for the city's fiscal future based on different kinds of development. And taxes have always gone up in Somerville, and they'll continue to go up because Somerville is land poor, Somerville has very little commercial development, and the only change that's going to reverse that trend for Somerville is the kind of intensive development that Mystic View has suggested and proposed and pointed the way for. There are a lot of other actors here too who are making decisions that hurt Somerville, and I don't hear anyone calling them on the carpet. We've got Kmart, which is enjoying a lease which is so below market rents and so restrictive that it's putting the owner of the mall site in a tough financial position, and threatens to blight the whole redevelopment potential of Assembly Square. If the Board of Aldermen, the administration, is going to be in dialogue with anyone about how their decisions are affecting the city's financial future, why not Kmart? That's the real dog in the manger here. Or Circuit City. At one point, there was a very sensible proposal that the city approached Circuit City about relocating possibly into the mall to allow the Home Depot to expand on that site. Circuit City wouldn't enter into that discussion. We could ask the MDC why they fail to maintain the parklands along the river. We could ask the MBTA why they're willing to spend $20 million to rebuild Government Center Station, which was rebuilt not that long ago and is in fairly good condition, and they won't spend $5 million to put in an Orange Line stop at Assembly Square. Somerville is on the losing end of a lot of big decisions, and seems to be passively accepting many of those, and yet willing to turn on its own citizens who are advocating for something better. And when I read in the newspaper that Mystic View is spoiling the city's prospects by advocating a utopian plan. What that says to me is somebody thinks that what's good enough for other communities isn't good enough for Somerville, and I object to that.
Thank you, Denise. Mr. John Rossi had to leave, and we have in his place Alan Steele. And Alan, I saw you when you spoke at Alderman Taylor had the hearing, and you came up as a contributor to give us some ideas. Could you share those ideas with us this evening?
Yes, Ted. Thank you for having me. I'm a resident of the 10 Hills. I'm a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for about 25 years, about the same length of time that I've lived in the 10 Hills. I walk to Assembly Mall. I walk to Home Depot. I'm a neighbor. I'm a member of the task force, but only for a few months. I became involved when I found out what was happening, and I was concerned about a number of issues, including revenue for the city. I know we need it, and I'm concerned about traffic most of all. I bicycle in that area, I walk my dog in the area, and I drive around there every day, and the traffic is dreadful. 2 blocks from my house, right by the mall, is one of the most deadly intersections in the state, and I can't imagine that we want more traffic. I'm particularly concerned that development seems to be proceeding apace without a comprehensive traffic study. The Cecil plan calls for one. Alderman Denise Provost's proposal calls for one. And the Mystic View proposal calls for a comprehensive traffic study as well. That should be done before the development commences. We don't have a master plan. If we had a master plan, we would have, the traffic study would be done. Without a master plan, we don't have any framework for the city to evaluate the potential merits of any proposal by any developer. The developer tends to lead the effort in that area, and that's backward. We have the money for a traffic study. Our Senator Shannon, a year or two ago, you may know, initiated legislation to establish money in the state budget. There's $150,000 that's available now through his efforts, available from the state to conduct that study. I'd like to see it done. It needs to be done, and then a master plan needs to be done as well before we start the work.
You may not know that the city did a traffic study, and it was commissioned and with the city engineers, and they gave Home Depot a clean bill of health. They had no complaints about traffic in the area, what the future looks like.
Well, that particular circumstance was the city engineers did not do a traffic study. City engineers reviewed the traffic study that was submitted by the developer, their engineers. And that traffic study was limited to a comparison of the proposed development, limited only to the new Home Depot proposal.
And just that.
And just that.
Right.
And also compared it to the traffic for a fully occupied mall. Our contention is, at Mystic View, that in fact it is not reasonable to limit the discussion of a traffic plan that only talks about that project, because it's not about the number of parking spaces that may be available, and I'm sure the existing zoning does provide for enough parking spaces. The big issue is, can the surrounding community and its road infrastructure support the additional amount of traffic, not only from that proposal, but if we look behind us here, if we can get a shot of the big map on the back here. Can we get that, folks? We zero in on that? Yeah. What this does is give us an opportunity to see, there's the new Home Depot up there on the upper center, the existing Kmart, the proposed IKEA, the Home Expo, which will be the conversion from the existing Home Depot, and the proposed permit application for the new Stop and Shop at the old Somerville lumber site. It's pretty clear that in order to fully evaluate the traffic impacts, one would have to take all of those stores into consideration. And some preliminary studies that we did, and I call them preliminary, because it will take a huge effort, namely a good chunk of the money that was provided by Senator Shannon, to go ahead and do a proper study, because all of those neighborhoods, particularly East Somerville, Lower Broadway, and 10 Hills, are going to be impacted enormously, including those small businesses that are already in operation there now.
By all means, let's do the best we can with the traffic. Let's keep it down if we can. I don't think you can go to any neighborhood in the city of Somerville and have people tell you that the traffic isn't horrible, because it's horrible every place. But I know on 28 it can get particularly bad because it's a main route. But and let's fix up that horrible intersection so that things aren't happy there. But I want to say, I think that there are solutions to those sorts of traffic problems.
I think so
and
too.
I don't think that it depends on, it doesn't necessarily depend on what whether it's big boxes in there or big office buildings. You're still going to have a lot of cars coming in there. And until we find some real alternative to the car, and who knows what that's going to be.
Well, we could start with an orange line stop.
Well, yeah, fine. Everybody would like that.
But there's different types of traffic. There's continuous traffic, and there's also traffic that comes in the morning and leaves in the evening time and all that. That is what you call controlled traffic. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've worked in I've worked for Raytheon, and when we've had traffic problems, we staggered shifts, and so people can leave at a certain time and get at a certain time. That controls the traffic on the streets of Waltham. And when you have big box and it's continuous traffic, it's not traffic. Somebody showed at 8 o'clock in the morning, went home at 5, and only moved twice. This is continuous. Came in, stayed a half an hour, moved out. Another person came in, and they keep on doing that. That's continuous traffic.
Just like Somerville Avenue, continuous traffic,
Yeah.
Walter, all day long.
Dale, you talk about all of Somerville. I'm telling you, stay down in East Somerville, and you'll see Pearl Street is one of the largest truck routes
Yeah,
I've seen.
and there ought to be a way to
I've
prevent
lived on
that. I
lived
agree.
on Pearl Street since 1963. I have a large picture window. It was a funeral home before I bought it. And I look out, now that I'm...
It's considerably livelier now.
Well, yeah, I raised 6 kids there. Did an excellent job keeping it alive. But when I look out that window and I see trailer trucks coming up and down, I'm talking about the box and the hitch and all that coming down. God forbid, they can't negotiate going on to McGrath Highway. How the hell did they get on Pearl Street? Did they go over a sidewalk, knock a lamppost down? Put the, these are things in the city.
Trucks shouldn't be on Pearl Street.
Traffic is not all the same.
Traffic's going to be tremendous too if they get their way.
Type of traffic, and certainly when you look at these big box warehouse type operations, they do draw larger vehicles.
So there's a differential.
Yes.
I'll concede that. But I also think that, if you do put an orange line stop in there, that's going to help with the cars.
Absolutely.
Even with some of the big box retailers. Maybe I don't know how much.
I'd like
Not
to
as
go
much as
back
we'd like, probably.
to what Alderman Provo talked about, because she brought up the issue of capitalization in this city. And the other thing that she brought up in the interview that we had with her, she mentioned MIPA has not been involved with this new location, and they have to sign off on this particular lumberyard with all the paints and all the other things. For the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Agency has to sign on and off on that location for them. They have to be certified safe. And what they look at is the roofing material, the paints, the solvents, all the other things, thousands of gallons of things. And before we close the show, the other point I wanted to bring up that maybe you would discuss is it left. There was the issue of, they're passing legislation in some counties and some towns that these lumber yards are hazardous areas. They're hard-to-hit areas, and they're legislating in some communities. Just a month ago, a young girl, a 3-year-old girl, was killed in a Home Depot when they were putting skids up on the top and they pushed the material off on the other side and it came down on her. And this is very common. As a matter of fact, when Charlie Tesh and myself, the director, were shopping there 2 months ago, the gentleman came up, the salesman came up and said, would you move because we're putting stuff up on the other side. So they've started a new program to warn people, but they're actually legislating in some communities that it's a hard hat area. Interesting, that when you go in, they would hand you a hard hat, that somehow that would preserve you or protect you from things coming down on the other side. But it's not a general, it's not really a location for a general population where people should go through and act as if they were in a Kmart, in one of those kind of stores, go in with kids and walking around and stuff like that. There are needs, and people are legislating the kind of controls that may be necessary in Somerville too. You know, it's something that, as Denise brought up, that should be considered. Do you have any reflections on that or ideas?
Well, certainly safety is always a big issue, and you know, to create a retail environment inside a warehouse, which is basically what many of these big box stores are. You know, the first 8 to 10 feet is the retail level. The next 15 to 20 feet is really storage level, and the sales volume is so enormous that during the normal work day, they have to bring fresh merchandise from the top down to the bottom so the retail folks can get to it. So, you know, but even that, it's not about criticizing their business methods. Yeah. They are one of the most, Home Depot particularly, and the Walmarts of the world are the most successful wave of this generation's retail giants. Right. And for all intents and purposes, they're here to stay. The question is, does Somerville need a preponderance of this type of development? And I say definitely not. That it does not serve the long-term interest of Somerville on any level.
You find communities are fighting back, and the reason why they're fighting back, when you take a Kmart, as we've seen so many towns that have been destroyed, we hear about them on television, and here's a perfect example of it, because they have a bigger card shop in Kmart than they had at the card shop that was in the mall, and they have a bigger shoe department than the shoe store that was in the mall. They have a bigger linoleum and they have a larger clothing department than the clothing stores that were in the mall. So you take one large store that comes in with 30 or 40 different stores in it, and all the other stores suffer.
It doesn't do much for entrepreneurial opportunities.
It doesn't, and that's why it's time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Lawrence, do you have a closing word you'd like to give to our audience?
I just want to thank many citizens of Somerville who have continued to make contributions to this outreach situation. So thank you for Mystic View, and thank you for allowing us to be on the show.
And thank you, guests, and thank you for Somerville Producers Group. Have a good evening.
I'm puzzled about something. I've been listening to speakers for an hour and a half, articulate speakers, well-informed speakers, passionate speakers. I've heard sound economic reasons, social reasons, cultural reasons, environmental reasons. I subscribe to the Somerville Journal. I think I read it, but I have missed something. We've got people here who haven't had dinner. We have more people on the floor than in the seats. Why are so many people here? Why do so many people have to take so much time? Why do so many people have to speak? I don't understand what the process is to make this happen, but it makes sense to me. Who needs to be convinced?
I want to reflect a little bit on some of the responses that I've heard about why this plan is unrealistic. I've heard, let's do something that is doable. I have heard that there are obstacles to this plan. I've heard, let us do what is safe. I've heard that the other plans are risky, that specifically the Mystic View plan is risky, and that the Provo plan is risky. I ask you to stick your neck out. I ask you to think about the future of Somerville. And I ask you to think about what your individual legacy will be.
The game is not over. The MOA is one step, but to reach our goal, we need to continue to work together the elected officials, and particularly I recognize the activity of citizens. We've come this far. It's no time to stop.